artist business loft warehouse thing. And it was fine, but I did want to be more connected to the city itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started looking for spaces around my neighborhood. The only places were really, kind of bigger and more than I could afford. So once I started looking at those spaces, I was like, oh, well, I could afford it by supplementing this space with also a retail shop in the front, and I could have 50-50. And so it was also kind of like by happenstance, I was like, I know I want to be in my neighborhood and I know I want to have a storefront, but the places that I liked and wanted were like, I couldn't afford it with what I was, bringing in currently. So I was like, well, I could do retail shop. And then once I started thinking about that, it really became, something I was like so excited about. And I have been in the stationery and gift industry at that point for like, 5 or 6 years. So I was like, I know all these independent card vendors and I've been going to trade shows, like exhibiting there. And I have all these ideas of how I could curate it and what I want it to look like. So, so just kind of realizing, I didn't realize I was excited about it until I was actually excited about it. And I was like, oh, I'm excited about this.
Yeah. Excellent. So what's interesting, actually, talk about the idea of the designer in you versus the business owner in you, and how those kind of maybe sometimes butt heads, but also align. So, I mean, obviously when you're thinking about designs of things, it's more about kind of what will sell, necessarily what is the most creative outlet for you. So how do you balance that, and how do you make decisions on what cards to use and move forward that way?
So I would actually say the cards that I feel the most kind of emotionally connected to are the ones that sell the best.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that they go hand in hand. I'm also like pretty equally right brain, left brain. Like I am a creative, but I also have a business side to me. And I think that I don't function well being one or the other. So it's nice to be able to have a balance, which I know that I'm like lucky, because a lot of people are either one or the other, and they like are business minded but then have a creative outlet, or they're creative but can't run a business. And so for me, I feel like if I spend too much time working on business stuff, I start to feel really stifled. But if I spend too much time doing creative stuff, then I really end up just kind of going out off the deep end a little bit. Like it's hard for me to be creative all the time, because then I just kind of get caught up in all the emotions I'm feeling, and it can spiral out pretty quickly. So it's nice to have the balance of both. And I would say on a day-to-day basis, it's not like 50% of the time I do this and 50% of the time I do this. It's kind of like one week I do this and another week I do that. And it's also way easier for me to like pick up and put down the business stuff, the numbers things, like, whereas when I get creative, I need to kind of follow a path. So I need, more, 3 or 4 days in a row to kind of like really start developing ideas and like, get the juices flowing, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So where do your ideas come from for the different designs you create?
My relationships with people mostly, because specifically greeting cards, you are helping two people communicate, either celebrate an event, or it's just you write in a card and you want the outside to, have a message. And so for me, it's really based on my personal experiences with, my friends, my family, my husband. So yeah. And it's based around, helping people communicate too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, great. So with your journey, the way you describe it is a kind of very logical progression on things, where things just kind of got bigger and bigger and bigger, which was great. The times when you felt fearful or apprehensive about where the company was going or growing or not growing, how did you approach those times and move past that fear?
Working. I will say that I definitely have workaholic tendencies. And my kind of, I'm never like paralyzed by fear. I'm only just like, how can I solve this? How can I do this? How can I, what's wrong? Like I keep kind of like, I'm very persistent. So the times that I've been, fearful or whatever, I keep just attacking a problem in different ways.
Yeah.
You know, Going to a trade show for the first time was a huge endeavor, really terrifying, really nerve-wracking. I mean, and I just kept like plugging at it and not sleeping a lot and doing everything I could. And, those times I don't know if it's necessarily the healthiest coping mechanism, but it at least like gets me through, at least like gets to a point where you will start to see kind of the fruits of your labors, I guess. Because like, well, at least the first trade show, I mean, afterwards I had like a breakdown. I just, like I was just so overworked and exhausted. And then the other big thing that I did was open the retail shop, which was terrifying, but I just knew I wanted to do it. So I was like, I'm just going to figure out how to make this
Mm-hmm.
work. Um, and then, and not just like, you can't just be like, oh, I'm just going to keep working. It's like you have to be smart and strategic about it too. You can't just, work and expect everything if you're doing the wrong thing when you're working, that's going to make everything worse too. So I kind of have to like be analytical of it as
Mm-hmm.
well. Um, and then there was another time specifically, it was a few years ago when we had first opened, and a woman who was working for me at the time, got into a coma, and then it was right before
Oh.
the holiday season.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was doing her job and my job, and we're understaffed in a gift shop in December. It was insane. And also at the end of that. So I just kind of kept going until I could get through it. But at the end of it, it was not sustainable at all. It was like 16-hour days, 7 days in a row for like 6 weeks or something. So
Mm-hmm.
it was just emotionally draining.
Yeah.
But it got me through to where I could be like, okay, now like reevaluate.
Yeah. So that brings up an interesting point. When you're looking at your business, how do you decide to bring on another employee?
It depends on how much needs to get done and, and how many hours there are in the day, I guess. It's like kind of just simple math.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm very, what's the word? Like not cautious, but like conservative with how I bring on help. So it'll be a part-time person, then it'll be another part-time person, then maybe the part-time person becomes a full-time person, and
Mm-hmm.
it's very slow increments. And I also like to, because I feel like I'm always in this sense of like anything could go away at any point. I kind of like start with like, we're going to start paying you at this point, just because I don't want to overextend and then have to take away money from you, but you'll get
Yeah.
like bonuses or like incentives or everything else, instead of being like, I'll pay you like $25 an hour and then be like, oh, I can't afford this. It's kind of like, we'll start here and then we'll like give you a few more hours, then we'll give you, a little raise, then we'll give you a bonus, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not kind of like, and I've never hired, there's only been one person that I hired on like full time, like as they came in, and that was just last year. Everyone else is either like part-time or started part-time then went to full-time, or a full-time person replaced a part-time person. So yeah.
Sure. How do you look at the future of your industry? In the retail shop and also in the main card business that you're in. Are there certain trends you look for or places that you look at? But how do you make decisions about 1 year, 3 years, 5 years from now?
As you can probably tell, I'm not like a really good long-term planner. So I usually do like 3 to 5 years is
Okay.
the most I'll do, just because I know how quickly things can change. If you asked me like 5 years ago if I was going to open a retail shop, I'm like, no, I'm like, I didn't, so it just, the things that happen along the way, you have to kind of be flexible to go with what's working.
Yeah.
So stationery specifically, I think bigger companies like Hallmark or Papyrus just filed bankruptcy and is closing down all their shops. I mean, like bigger companies that were more for everybody, like grandmas and every, like Walgreens and whatever. I think
Mm-hmm.
those type of greeting cards, those like kind of big players in the industry are getting smaller,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the smaller boutiques like what I do and a lot of my other colleagues. Those are the ones that are seeing growth because people, if you're going to send a like generic birthday greeting, you could just do it on Facebook now. You don't need a card for everything. But if you're going to take the time to buy a card, you want it to be special and unique and potentially handmade or say exactly what you want it to say. And so I don't think that any of the smaller greeting card companies that are, growing now or thriving would ever equal what Hallmark was like in the 90s. But I think that there's definitely like a shift in the industry in terms of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then brick and mortar, I mean, I don't know, honestly. I like there's a Target that's opening up in my neighborhood, like just a few blocks away from me. That terrifies me.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, where I was when I opened, there wasn't anything really like us. And it was because it was in my neighborhood and I've lived in my neighborhood for 12 years. But my neighborhood is, very quickly gentrifying and changing. And so I don't know what that means for the future of my brick and mortar specifically, because
Okay.
like we can't offer Target prices. We just can't.
Right.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
But I would like to think that what we have is like, more unique and like not as generic as something you could find in Target. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
that will help.
Yeah. So with your sales, how many of them come from your online store, like just on your greeting cards and other stationery, versus people who come into the store and physically buy them?
So very few people buy our stuff online. We're
Okay.
mostly wholesale and retail.
Yeah.
So, and it's about 50-50 what the retail store makes. And then the other 50% is, or whatever, it's like 49, 50, something like that is what we sell wholesale, like at trade shows and to like
Mm-hmm.
other stores around the country.
Yeah.
Paper Source is definitely our biggest account. And then, but like in our retail store, it's only like 10% of the sales in our retail store are actually our products. There's the other sales are from, we have candle vendors and glassware and mugs and things like that.
Sure. Sure. Oh, that's awesome. So so I find it fascinating that particularly in your area that people like the tactile part of it. They want to go in and they want to, see the item, maybe touch the card, read it versus just buy something online. I think that's
Well,
absolutely
if you
fascinating.
think about it, like you buy a $5 card online and then you pay $3 shipping for it. It's like not that,
I
I
guess
don't
there's that too. Yeah.
know. Like it's more for bigger purchases, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool. So with everything that you have done and experienced so far, what would you say has been the best advice that you've ever received?
In terms of running a business or in terms of
It could be about
just,
anything. Running a
okay.
business, how you approach your art, just
Yeah.
whatever has helped you the most. And it could be just
Um,
in one area too.
yeah. I mean, yeah, know your numbers, I guess, if you're running a business. And then also, take care of your like personal health should be number one priority.
Hmm.
Because if you don't have your own personal health, then you can't actually, run your business or take care of yourself or have any time to, do the things that are actually important in life, like experiences and family and relationships and stuff like that.
Hmm. Well, great. Well, Shayna, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I really appreciate it. If the listeners would like to physically go to your shop, what's the address? And also, what are other ways they can see what you're working on and also what's your website?
It's steelpetalpress.com. And then we also have like Instagram and Facebook that's at Steel Petal Press.
Okay, well, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I'll put that in the show notes, and so they can click right through and hopefully get some of your cards and see what you're up to.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This is great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Advance Your Art podcast. If you like this episode, please go into iTunes and give us a 5-star rating. And while you're there, hit the subscribe button so that every single time I release a new episode,